Good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, so that means it's time for another check-in video. Kind of excited about this one because I got some stuff to show off that I've worked on in Input Mapper. Mainly the macros. I've made a lot of progress in that, and it's opened up a lot more possibilities for the macros. So I'll be demoing that in just a bit. First, one of the things I want to talk about is all the discussion that's been going on about the latency graph and the lack thereof now in the new version of Input Mapper. And I wrote an article. Some people read it, some people obviously did not, because they still complain about the lack of latency display, and how they use that to know whether or not they're getting quick response in the game and all that, yada yada. And I keep trying to explain that even though it was a misnomenclature, I mistitled that as latency, and everybody took it to mean, this is the latency you're getting when you use the controller. It actually was not latency and has absolutely nothing to do with latency. So, I mean, for the first couple, if you guys want to skip ahead to the Input Mapper part, go ahead. But for the first couple minutes of this, I'm going to try to explain to people what that number is and what the program does and how it's being calculated. So I'm going to sketch something out for you to hopefully, make so people understand it. So you have the way Input Mapper works is it's pooling data at a interval rate. The controller is sending out data at an interval rate. So that interval rate in which those two meet, say we're getting, these are data packets and we're getting them at regular intervals like this. And this is what the controller is sending out here in blue. And then we have Input Mapper, which is pooling the data at the same rate that the controller is sending it out. The way that these line up, it's connecting your inputs and your outputs there, but the way those line up, if they deviate at all, so if I were to take this and shift it, that's your latency. Actually, this would go to the right. So now you have Input Mapper that's receiving the packets slightly after they're being sent out, causing this shift. And that deviation in time right there, which is what that width is, that's your latency. And that's not being measured at all by Input Mapper. Instead, what Input Mapper is measuring is actually just the distance between the packets. So that's not latency at all. And what that is that it's measuring is the data rate, for lack of a better term. And what I did is, since that's a fixed data rate, number of packets per second, I converted that into a time span. So when using Bluetooth, this would be about 1.6 milliseconds in between each of these packets here. But that doesn't at all account for whatever this time span is, because there's no way for us to measure that. We don't know how long that packet spends in the controller. We don't know how long that packet spends in the air. And this is sometimes this thing wants to work, sometimes it doesn't. But since we can't measure, how long that spends in the air and all that time span between the sending and the receiving of the packet, it's completely lost. Therefore, the idea of measuring latency, it's impossible for us to do. So, I mean, And it's further, you know, the further example of the fact is if you have a USB controller, you plug it in, it's in the old version, it's going to say the latency is like 5 milliseconds, something like that. Whereas if you have a Bluetooth, it's going to say it's 1.5. And that doesn't make any sense because the latency is lower on Bluetooth. I'm sorry, the latency is lower on USB because it's a direct wire device. But USB is throttled as far as its pooling rate, which means that, you know, this that we have here, it's actually slower. So it looks like that. And, you know, our 1 point something milliseconds has now become 5 milliseconds. So it's obvious that USB isn't, you know, less latent, or more latent rather. So that throws the theory right there out the window. And you take that, you know, even further, and you use the Sony adapter, and that measures, that only refreshes at a rate of like 140, 145 hertz, which comes out to about 8 milliseconds, give or take. So, I mean, it's the Sony adapter, it's not adding 8 milliseconds of lag, especially not when you compare it to Bluetooth, which is, even though they're both operating under Bluetooth, the Sony version is sort of a proprietary spin-off. It's not more latent, so it's, I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining it, but to help avoid future confusion, I've changed the nomenclature in the program, the verbiage anywhere that, you know, it says latency and all that stuff, and I've changed that to read as like device frequency or update frequency. And I'll jump over here and I'll show that. It's compiling. Let's give it a second here. Here it comes. Okay, there we go. Alright, grab one of my controllers here. Power that guy up. Alright, so what I've done here is, you see data rate now is used instead of latency. And this is a much more accurate representation as to what is actually happening. Data rate 128 hertz is actually what's going on. It's reading that data at 128 times a second. Bluetooth here, my data rate's 600 hertz, which that's actually kind of high, better than I normally get. Usually I'm in like the 580s, but so that's a lot more representative as to what that, you know, number actually means. It's the same number that you guys were getting with the latency with the milliseconds. I just added some math in there to turn it into a frequency, so it's per 1 second how many packets you're getting. So you have that, and people that are worried about, well, I want to know if I'm getting good reception and all that stuff on your controller, blah, blah, blah. Well, you still get that. These bars here above the controller, that's your actual reception. Right now I'm getting full signal strength. I'll see if I can put this behind my back or something to kind of thwart it a little bit. No, see, I'm sitting right next to the adapter, so it's not gonna And there, it went down 1 bar. So I don't know, but if it does get too bad, the controller will turn orange, or actually rather yellow, and then it'll turn red if it's completely unusable. Input mapper will still pop up and say you're getting high latency, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff will still happen. So if there is a communication issue where you're not getting good signal on the controller, input mapper will let you know. That stuff has not been hidden. It hasn't gone away. It's still there. I'll shut that controller down. So people that are upset that, you know, I hid that functionality where their controller could start lagging and they don't know, you know, if it's because of input mapper or something, it's still there. So I don't know what people are arguing about. Something else I did was I made these icons a little bigger so they are easily, a little more easily viewed if you're farther away. The battery will change colors. It'll go into a red if it gets too low. You'll notice the UI. I posted a couple pictures. I've been playing around with this to switch the UI over to this more kind of a tabular navigation, which lightens up the code a lot because this is just a native Windows control, so I'm not having to write a bunch of code to handle special actions for it. So it lightens up the code, makes it a little less buggy, works better. So yeah, that's some of the UI improvements. Obviously, you guys remember that our DualShock 4 audio now works for using the Sony adapter. So if you guys haven't had a chance to get your hands on one of those and play around with it, I suggest you do, because it's actually pretty cool. And I don't know if a Windows update did this or if I accidentally fixed the issue, but I was having an issue where my adapter would not get exclusive mode at all, and now all of a sudden it's getting exclusive mode every time without an issue. So I don't know if Windows pushed some sort of an update to fix some things in the background. If they did, awesome. That's one of the rare occasions where they fix shit instead of breaking it for us. But yeah, that was the biggest reservation I had with this adapter, was not being able to get exclusive mode. But now, since that seems to be working, I hope it's not just me. Hopefully you guys can reproduce this. But now that you're getting exclusive mode, I really don't see any reason why not to get one of these adapters. It's actually great. It makes pairing the controller easy. You get your audio. It does feel faster. So here we are again, data rate, that's a lower number. You would think that means that it's slower, but it actually feels more responsive in the game. The latency feels better. So definitely suggest getting your hands on one of those adapters. So now that we've done that, let's take a look at some of the new macro toys that I've been working on. So we're going to jump over here into the command screen. Triggers is not something I've started working on yet. I've been kicking around some ideas in my head how I want that to go. The style that I had where it was, you know, red and green, it worked to a point, but it didn't allow me to add extra things like if I wanted it to only trigger, like if the stick was at a certain amount, stuff like that, it wouldn't allow that. So I'm thinking of a new system that'll allow a lot more options for people to create triggers to these macros. And just like there's a lot more options to the triggers, there's a ton more options that are coming to the commands. One of the things that people have been asking for is the ability to record macros, because sometimes, you know, inserting those key by key can get tedious. So, listening to you guys, I have been working on a macro recorder for this. And it's going to do a lot more than just record your keyboard. You're going to be able to record your keyboard, your mouse movements, your controller, anything else I can think of. I mean, that's all that really comes to mind, but Even inside those, keyboard is the only one that I've gotten to record written for so far, but you can further, granulate down into whether or not you want to record the pauses in between your presses. If you want to record the press and the release as a separate command, you can record the keyboard repeats if you hold down a key. So I mean, we'll go ahead and play with some of that. For my first demo, I'll just take all of these off, and we're going to record just a simple hello. And you'll see the arrows popped up next to each of these momentarily, and it did that until it recognized that I also released the key. So it changed it from being, in just a held down state to when I released the key, it changed it to a press and release. And that was this option being unchecked. And for simple things, it makes the excuse me, my throat is pretty dry. It makes the actual macro command a lot shorter and easier to read and manage. So I will throw a pause in here as well, just to kind of make this easier to manage. And I'm going to switch to I'm going to play it. There's a test here, so I can test the macro from within this. I'm going to hit this, and since I got a 4-second pause now, I'll have enough time to jump over to my notepad, and we'll see if that outputs our hello. So I pushed it, jumped over, and there it is. And since, there's no pauses or anything in there, it just throws it all out there as fast as it can cycle through that macro. So that works. We'll go back over into our macro studio here. Let's get rid of this. And this time, we're going to record the pauses as well. And we're going to record presses and releases separately. Now, this is going to make the macro quite a bit longer because not only are we doubling each key event, we're recording the press and the release as a separate thing, but we're also recording the time span in between the press and the release and the time span in between the release and the next key press. So there's going to be a lot more stuff in this macro. And I'll also type out a little bit more just so we can, see, get a better idea of what it looks like here. So I'm going to start recording. Alright, so you can see there we got a lot more complicated with all those pauses and presses and releases in there. So we're going to add another pause in of 4 seconds just so we have enough time to get back to our notepad. There we go. Hit test, jump over here, and we'll watch that play out. And you see there, it even backed up because when I was typing it out, I made a typo and had to delete back a couple characters and get rid of it. You can see that here in my backspace. So as a matter of fact, if I wanted to even clean that up, I have my SYSTE, and this was supposed to be the M, but I accidentally typed a comma. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that area. Play it again. Oop, I keep going back to the wrong window. Here we go. And it'll skip that comma part. There we go. And so, I mean, that's just some of the things that we're going to be able to do. Another thing that I'm excited about is the ability to, haven't got it working quite well yet, but it's going to be able to record your mouse movements. And you'll have the option to whether or not you want to, have it snap to position every time you click on something, which is all you really need if you're just clicking through menus or windows. But there'll also be the option for it to animate the movement in between point A and point B, and that'll be helpful if the mouse is controlling things like camera, stuff like that. So I mean, I can insert cursor positions here. We'll wait half a second. Insert another cursor position. Wait half a second. Another cursor position. And then we'll take this. Oop. I wanted to copy the whole thing. There we go. And let's play through that. So I don't know how well that's coming through to you guys, but my mouse is jumping across the screen. I'll do it again. And so that works, and I'm working on the logic right now that'll actually animate it between 2 points. Right now it's just snapping to location. So yeah, it's coming together pretty well. I'm happy. The way that I'm writing the code right now will allow for me to add macro commands a lot more easily, and for me to add all kinds of different macro commands. So if people, have suggestions as to anything that they want to see that, haven't been in previous versions, I plan on adding a lot more options as far as like Windows access, changing volumes, cycling applications, anything that I can, get my hands on as far as the Windows API that I can pipe into this. I'm going to give, going to try to do my best to get those in there. So I think that is about all. I'm not working off of any notes, so hopefully I didn't miss anything. One thing I do want to point out, if you guys need help or troubleshooting or support of any kind, use our forums. Don't use YouTube. If you want to just comment to YouTube like, hey, great video, stuff like that, stuff that you don't need me to reply to, awesome, go ahead, do it. I'll read it, I see it. But the thing is, replying to comments on YouTube is freaking bugged. Every time I get an email that somebody's asked me something and I try to reply to them, yeah, I get errors saying cannot reply to message at this time, stuff, nonsense like that. It's a freaking headache. So if you need help, go to our forums, post in there. You need to do it through our forums anyways, because I'm going to need your logs in order to really accurately track down issues. And that's stuff that you can't post on YouTube comments anyway. So yeah, use our forum. No reason to ask people on Reddit. They don't know any more about my application than I do. So all right, guys, that'll do it. Like the video, subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, yada yada yada. Have a good one.